they're taking a holiday. At least she is. Not all of her folks. But, so that's fun. There's, as usual, tons of things about Hegel that I haven't talked about. There's tons of things about John Stuart Mill that I haven't talked about. But today we're supposed to start with Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard is pretty darn important. Because he's still incredibly relevant to a lot of people that I know. And so notice that I have a warning on this one. It's the only one where I've done this. I put a warning: studying the following philosopher may be dangerous for your mental health. And it occurred to me to say, well, why is that? Why is studying him dangerous? It's, number one, what I'm going to say about him shouldn't be thought of as making life dangerous for you. So I'm not giving you a trigger warning about my lecture. The problem is reading him. People that read him and really immerse themselves in his writing. He's very powerful. He catches a lot of people's interest, and then they want to read more. And the trouble is, it's like almost like a drug, a dangerous kind of drug. So reading him, on the one hand, seems almost the kind of thing that it's a stage on life's way, which is what he says. But at the same time, you should be able to get through it. You should be able to get over it, be aware of what he's doing, read him enough with kind of protection, have ahead of time a realization that it can be one of those rabbit holes where you fall in and beware of falling pianos. That's the kind of thing you have to watch out for while you're going down the rabbit hole. There's a lot of dangers in the rabbit hole. So be forewarned ahead of time, and remember that you need a parachute. Don't just get stuck reading Kierkegaard. Be ready to just leap out, take a leap of faith, and escape from the dilemmas that he sets himself. And in fact, just this morning, as I was reading some more stuff, it occurred to me that he's kind of like an incel. David and I couldn't remember what the I stood for, but it stands for involuntary celibate, right? Are you familiar with that concept? I don't know if there's an equivalent for the female as well. I would imagine there is, isn't there? Does that make sense? That there are women that are, I mean, look how many goofy videos you have of people that are trying to be influencers, with, short little videos and, the goofy things that they do. And yes, I see them. You can't avoid them. And the question is, why are there, so many of these as well? There's clearly a desire from both sides, or actually, today I can't just talk about two sides. There's 450 possible genders, according to Judith Butler.
It's called femcel, by the way.
Femcel?
Fem.
Femcel. Really?
Yeah.
Did you just
I never
admit
heard
it?
that till just now.
Just now. Interesting. Well, because it's not just a male thing. But I mean, I suppose the thing that gets me is, let me do the basics here first before I go off on my musings on Soren. Go very far. So just placing him in time here. So short lifespan, what is it, 41 years, I think? 42, okay, 42 years. 1813, 1855. So, and he's Danish, which is not a dessert donut kind of thing. You know that? That's a place. In fact, I guess the Danish pastry is called that because Danes made it? I don't know. That could be. Why else would you call it a Danish? I don't know. It's not like it has more icing or something because it's a Danish. And what's important here is he is a post-Hegelian. So thank you, David. The quiz question that I asked about him is, what do you think, or how do you understand his concept of the Knight, Knight, of fear and trembling? And if you're reading the work that actually applies to multiple situations, but the main character that he describes is Abraham in his evaluation of the biblical story about Abraham taking his son up to the mountain top to sacrifice him, and all the variations of the story not, by the way, not the ones that include Ishmael. He's not apparently aware of the variation that is more of the Arabic version of that one. So it's just Isaac that he's concerned about. But the decision of Abraham, the faith, the question of the faith. So, but let me point out, as a post-Hegelian, and that's the important thing. This is not just a puzzle for people in general, because if you are not a post-Hegelian, I don't think the issue even arises, actually. I'm not sure what that would be like. But what I mean by a post-Hegelian is you basically accept our contemporary post-Hegelian point of view that knowledge is social. So you have kind of this dialectical process that's going on. Remember the same thing as the servant, the master's servant. It's the self-consciousness dialoguing with itself and recognizing that you are the center of the universe, obviously from the David Hume perspective and the Kantian perspective, and of course now the Hegelian perspective. And yet you have what we call the sociality of reason. Pulling that from a particular title. So this is Terry Pinkard, one of the primary contemporary analysis of Hegel's phenomenology. And remember my question too on test 3, that while Kant gave us psychology as an issue, Hegel gives us sociology as an issue. And in a sense, that's where I find the bedrock solution to Kierkegaard's problem as well. What problem am I talking about? Well, once you read and study Hegel, and Kierkegaard does, he gets a major dose of Hegel at the University of Copenhagen, where he is studying to be a Lutheran minister, which he never becomes, although he does give sermons, etc., as part of his magister training, his master's degree training. I mean, really, he was a Lutheran minister in everything except the ordination. And you know, here's your parish, you know, kind of thing. So he studies Hegel. Remember, Hegel was Lutheran too, by the way. I might not have pointed that out. One of the reasons Hegel was appointed to the chair of philosophy and the head of the university in Berlin was because he was a moderate Lutheran. They were trying to find a solution to a city that was in intellectual turmoil. Schleiermacher was a big Lutheran theologian in Berlin, and he was very, very liberal. And of course, the bulk of the Berliners were very conservative. And so, in looking for someone to replace Fichte, they picked Hegel, and that was because he was viewed as a moderate and a Lutheran, of course. So the problem is, if you accept this dialectic that the self-consciousness goes through, Kierkegaard ignores the social context of that dialectic. And by the way, the other next class, the other response to Hegel of being a post-Hegelian. So that's another example of someone who's a post-Hegelian. So at this point, I'm just dealing with us assuming that even in this class, by reaching this historical point, we become post-Hegelians. We realize this kind of thesis that knowledge is social, dialectical, constantly in a process, and so on, and clearly comes from a particular perspective. We today, I think, have the benefit of looking at it from what we call a meta perspective, so that we can look at all of these, historical developments in a context and compare them with one another and say, well, this one, is very conservative and is pushing the pendulum this way, and this one is very liberal and pushes the pendulum this way, and next week it'll go more this way or this way. You have to silo it. You have to say, well, in New York City right now, the pendulum has moved towards the liberal side. It was already on the liberal side for the most part, but what we see now is we have Mamdani as the electorate's choice for mayor. Would that happen here in Anchorage? No. Anchorage is much too conservative, I think, for us to have expected someone like him to have been elected here. Right? So you have silos with different groupings of this dialectical business. Very complex, doesn't give us an easy answer for things. But the question for Kierkegaard, out of all of this, is to focus on the self. Where am I in all of this? How do I come to believe with the kind of faith or the kind of security in my decision that I feel a sense of confidence and positivity in the direction of my life? How do I make my life meaningful? Basically, what has happened, thanks to the Hegelian view, all of the traditional narratives that explain why we are here, what our place is in the universe, and how we should maintain that place, are radically done away with. They're all false. None of them are factual. They're all made up by human beings. Whether the human beings even realized that's what they were doing or not. They were making these up. Making these stories up. And as a result, I can't believe any of them are true. How can I be a Christian and believe that these Christian stories and values are true? By the way, we'll see Nietzsche will rebel against these as well for the exact same kinds of reasons. His reaction is different than Kierkegaard, but also equally persuasive to an awful lot of people today. And also, I would argue, very dangerous in a lot of ways. But so you've got this radical development where the very thing that makes us so human is our belief in a story that we're participating in. The reason that we live here, the reason we were even made a species. God made man and put him in charge of the garden, or in charge of the animals, or here's this story that we can trace this back to Abraham, and it's not just Abraham. Remember, if we look at all of the religious traditions of the world, there's commonalities in all of them. Check Carl Jung, for example, and the universality of so many of these different stories and the metaphors and everything. So we've got all these traditions that give us the sense that we're here for a purpose, a divine purpose. And now, none of that is believable anymore. There's no reason. There's no purpose. There's no story unless you make one up. You have to make one up for yourself, for you to believe in it. That's what Kierkegaard thinks, right? Kierkegaard thinks, okay, I have to make up my own story. So there's this rabbit hole. I think it's a good metaphor. He's fallen into this rabbit hole and he's looking for a reason for living. And I also like the metaphor of the two mirrors. When you look in the two mirrors, you see the reflections, and they go on and repeat and repeat and repeat. What would it mean to be looking for the original, reflection, the original one where everything starts, to say, aha, there's my true self. No, your true self is this almost infinite series of reflections, right? That's Hegel, right? You can think about yourself, thinking about yourself, thinking about yourself, etc. Right? As far as you want to go. What does that do to your personality? Does that change your voice at different times? Can you be 16 different people depending on the situation you're in? Judith Butler's 450 different types of genders fits that beautifully, actually, right? How's that supposed to stabilize your sense of self-worth and your purpose and your meaning? Kierkegaard feels like, well, what happens once you become a Hegelian? Well, the first thing, his first response, his first stage, is what he calls the aesthetic. So the first stage for a post-Hegelian, and this actually might be a post-Hegelian who doesn't really understand Hegel, gets the point that it's my decision, I'm the one, the self-consciousness that needs to dialectically choose my own sense of purpose and meaning, my teleology, right? My purpose. I'm the one that has to do that. But initially, the young male, because he's a young male when he realizes this, decides, well, the whole point of life is just to have a good time, to enjoy yourself. And he does. Although he's depressed while he's doing it. One of his diaries says he's at a party, he's the hit of the party, everybody loves talking to him, they're all having a good time listening to his witty banter and everything, he's having a terrific time. And he comes home and he pulls his pistol out of his drawer and thinks about shooting himself. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you're the hit of the party and you come home and you feel like killing yourself because the party's over. Man, I half wonder, by the way, about individuals that have been in battle and the stresses that go on